Well, folks, thanks for tuning in to the special Halloween edition of Stockwell Day Day-to-Day News. Thanks for joining the increasing numbers in Canada and the US who are tuning in to hear the headlines of the day, but with insights behind those headlines that you won't get from mainstream media. So we appreciate that very much. And one of the comments we're getting back from one of our viewers, I'm trying to be careful with this and keep sending those comments in. They help me as I move around the country and do these various podcasts. And this one was to say, be factual, make sure you're being factual. And it was tied into the story we did about the grizzly bear and the grizzly bear fighter from Canada who took on a grizzly and won, at least for a while, took on a half-a-ton grizzly bear, and unfortunately he died in the process. But the comment that came back was, check the figures, because I gave, when I was talking about a grizzly bear and how heavy they are and how fast they can run, and was giving the conversions on kilometers and also miles for our US audience, that it wasn't quite accurate. So thanks for the prompt there to make sure all our facts are accurate. And I'll just close out that thought by saying grizzly bears are really, really fast. So looking at the news for today, we've got some scary stuff, some positive stuff, some scary stuff on the economic side. Now, this is related to Canada and the Canadian economy continuing to shrink. Not good numbers coming out of the Canadian economic scene. We keep repeating, we keep saying to the government and to provincial governments, listen, if you are going to keep raising taxes, if you're going to keep borrowing, if you are not going to look at how you wrestle the deficit down, get a balanced budget and get it under control, your payments for the interest on your borrowings, on your bonds, are going to keep going up, and that means quality of life will only continue to go down for all those politicians of whichever political party. If you're just afraid of losing some votes because of people who don't want to see government dollars spent more efficiently, then maybe you shouldn't be in office, because what we should be there for is taking care of the futures of our citizens, their future hopes, and let's keep those deficits and debts wrestled under control. Mainstream media could help in that regard also, but they don't, because mainstream media, anytime there is, let's say, a layoff in government or an efficiency somewhere, they take it to nuclear level. They make it sound like the end of the world is happening. Therefore, politicians get terrified and they back off. So let's have some courageous political moves that are built on economic fact, and the fact of what keeps economies flourishing and what keeps families happy because they can take care of themselves. Let's keep focused on those things. If you are newly elected at one of the municipal levels, and we were talking about this somewhat yesterday, one of the things now we're seeing out of surveys coming out of the US in terms of why more companies from around the world, in fact, are not investing in Canada unless they get huge taxpayer subsidies. Why is this happening? What's the reluctance about investing in Canada? And it increasingly comes back to the horrendous stack of regulations that face any kind of decision or anything a citizen or a business wants to do. Of course, we have to have regulations relative to safety, and we know that, but it's gone completely out of control with the combination of municipal, provincial, and federal regulations. So if you are newly elected and that happy band of administrators comes to you suggesting here's all the new rules, the new laws we have to have, you've got to look at those one by one. Start by asking the question, if we don't bring in this brand new regulation, who will die? Ask that very specifically. Who will die if we don't do this? And then ask, who's opposing it? Who's opposing this regulation, and who will be hit negatively by that? Were they consulted to see if there were some alternative approaches? And then, how real was the public really advised about the upcoming regulation, whatever it might be? All new elected people and existing one, please ask your bureaucrats and your officials these questions when they bring the new regulations to you. Regulators are well-meaning people, but regulators, they're like a hammer looking for a nail, and make sure that it's a nail that is needed. You know, we looked at one of the other factors in terms of the market. We touched on this yesterday. I want to just mention it again today. Remember, when you are looking at, if you look at what's the stock market doing today, what did it do yesterday? Overall, is the stock market up? Is the stock market down? Remember that three gigantic companies, Google, Apple, Meta, these companies control about 20% of the entire stock market in terms of shares that are in place, acquired or sold or bought on a given day. So always remember, when you see a move in the market, how much of that was affected by just three companies, how much is being affected by other issues, something to keep in mind. And then as we look at this and the whole question of AI, there's been, as you know, a kind of a war between artists and musicians and between the AI companies, because as we know now, artificial intelligence is so incredible that it can create songs and music all on its own, and I might add some pretty good stuff out there. Musicians and artists are quite rightly concerned about this, and there's been a lawsuit has just been settled, a massive lawsuit actually. The United Music Group, UMG, sued some time ago, started a lawsuit against the AI firm called Udio. Now, that particular firm, as AI does, AI just, for instance, on information, let's say, other than music, let's say scientific or sports information or historical, they just gather from all the data that's out there, and then they come up with conclusions and they come up with a story. So these AI approaches with music, they just gather from the millions and millions of chords and rhythms and progressions that are being put out there every day, and they can make some pretty good music. But in fact, in doing that, they are taking the chords and progressions and musical notes that artists have put in place without acknowledgement or payment. So there's been this giant lawsuit about that, about proprietary rights and ownership rights done by the United Music Group. And they have settled, actually, believe it or not, they've actually settled with the group called Udio. And that settlement has been joined by three of the largest companies that control performance rights of artists. And what the AI firm has agreed to do is to engage with artists, find out from artists what it is what clicks inside the brain, the heart, the mind of a musician to come up with whatever progressions or chords or flow of music or sound that they want to then create a song, let's say. And so they are consulting now. There's going to be this ongoing consulting process between the AI side and the true human creation side, and they've worked out a way to do that and actually to compensate them then from musicians who've come up with various types of music and chord progressions. There's a way to compensate. Musicians and some of these artist guilds are actually looking quite favorably at this approach because they are acknowledging the marvels of AI. But we never want to see the human element tapped away from this. So watch for that to continue. The other breakthrough, and this will be a relief to people in the political world. Of course, we know in the capital cities of the world, whether we're talking about Washington, D.C., whether we're talking about Ottawa, or provincial capitals or state capitals around the world, there's always a group, and they sometimes get a bit of a nasty reputation of being kind of a shadowy group, but it's called the lobbyists. And these are the people who bring forward concerns from groups that hire them, and then they bring it forward to the political people. And lobbying has really gone AI recently and is going to more so. This is going to be where an elected person, let's say there's a subject that is being addressed and it's affecting some groups, so those groups would go and hire lobbyists, and usually they pay a pretty price for them, and they get advice, and then they try and impact the elected person. Now, what the groups are doing is using AI to come up with the most fantastic video, sound, and visual productions in a short period of time, and pieces that are not very long in length, and getting those elements in front of the elected people in a very attractive, compelling way, which doesn't require the elected person to be attending endless streams of meetings. So lobbying in itself is now more and more going to be done by AI itself, and we're going to see some changes there, reduction of prices for sure. Lobby firms, because they have high-priced people, tend to be quite expensive, and the opportunity is now opening up to AI firms who will do the lobby pitch directly, is going to make for some interesting dynamics. Talk about interesting dynamics. Here we are at Halloween. It was announced by the FBI in the US just today that a major terrorist ring was infiltrated, busted, and apprehended, and that happened just yesterday and today. And this group in Michigan was set to, and the details are going to be coming out, set to be doing some pretty massive destructive terrorism around certainly the US, possibly into Canada, all kind of coordinating in with the horrors of the horrors of Halloween. So it's going to be interesting to watch as the details of that come out. In terms of the younger population, and you're thinking about your kids, you're thinking about Halloween, you're thinking about what they're doing at school, some of the brands that the really young ones are wanting to get and wanting to purchase, and we're just saying this to alert parents, you can look like you're really in the know by knowing some of these products, and then you can also maybe look for products that are less expensive. But believe it or not, lip gloss is a big item in the school corridors and hallways these days. And you might think, oh, that'll be something I can buy for my daughter because lip gloss is not that expensive. Oh no, once these things go name brand, once they go viral, once they've been promoted by an influencer of, let's say, 14-year-olds, the price goes up. So expensive lip gloss is really happening. A form of currency that's taking place in the schools and the hallways. Kids are swapping their keychains. They're trying to get either gifted or buy unique types of keychains and then trade them with their friends. Also, don't forget the plushie items like Jellycat plushies. If you want to be really cool, or you want your kid to be cool, don't just get them any kind of water bottle. Get them an Owala water bottle. By the way, I don't get compensated for doing these promotions. So I hope the companies that mention them, are going to think about me in the future. But these are the types of things that are grabbing sort of the 13, 14-year-old crowd. And yes, we know it's all about online shopping, but mall crawls, actually going to the mall, going to a store and finding kind of offbeat stores to purchase offbeat items. These are all kind of the rave for the purchasing power, and it's quite significant. Anything from sort of 9 to 14-year-olds. So mall crawls, take your kids mall crawling. The teacher strike that's taking place in Canada, there's a large one right now in Alberta, and also the closing down of the Federal Department of Education in the US. There's some things in common between these groups, and it has to do with teachers' unions. I'm not talking about the teachers themselves now. Most of us know teachers that are wonderful and dedicated and committed to their craft, but they have to operate under some pretty strict guidelines that are given to them by their unions. And so, we're seeing something taking place in Alberta where the union, thinking that it was entirely shutting everything down by going on strike, and also protest in the US because of the closing down of the Department of Education, which is a federal department. And the government in the US is saying this should be operated by the state. Each state's going to be a little bit different. That's caused real concern. And if you listen to the union leaders, it's like the end of the world. In fact, what's happening is larger and larger numbers are moving to alternate education, whether it's charter schools, whether it's online education. And I do believe we're on the cusp, and in fact, we're right into it, a revolution in education and how kids are taught things. And more people are seeing with the amazing breakthroughs with online capacity that kids learning at home online have time left over during the day. A typical online approved curriculum, 2 hours a day would sort of be maximum because the teaching is intense. It's coming from AI developed materials. It's very interactive. Students are allowed to go one-on-one and capable of go one-on-one. And so it explains why the academic scores are doing better for people who are taking their courses online or taking them in alternate schools. There's a number of reasons for that, but it is happening. It's going to continue. And keep in mind that the longer a child sits under a system that, let's say, is negative towards the one they grew up with at home, the more difficult it's going to be. The education system, of course, is entirely culturally Marxist. We've talked about that before. It doesn't mean they are running around saying they're communists. No, we live in a country where you elect people. But you take the principles of Marxism, of Karl Marx himself, and transfuse those into the public schools and into the universities, as has happened for decades now. Then you get an educational product, that'd be the students themselves, that will reflect those principles. So Karl Marx, of course, his key principle is that there is no God, and kids who are in a public system, they come out being taught that if there is a God, it's not relevant, and certainly won't be talked about at school. And if there's no God, then the definition of what a family should look like, the construction of a family, we're being told in schools it's an evil construct, it's man-made, it was not created by God, there's no male-female distinction. So, and then on the economic side, if you don't need families, you don't need homes, so private property becomes less of an issue. And of course, if you want to stomp out anybody who opposes you, you can't just shoot them in the streets like Lenin did, not John Lennon the singer, Vladimir Lenin, and like Stalin did. And every communist regime has to have a way to eliminate, publicly, quickly, and severely eliminate any voice speaking against them. And that's very much something that has been happening, but has been revealed in these teacher strikes, that actually, because as kids then seek other ways to continue to be educated in their subjects, they're finding the marvels of the most up-to-date and interactive tools for education. And here's where elected people need to take note. You should be asking and demanding that there's more than just one track for a student to run down to get to a certain level. There can be a number of different tracks. The education community says they love diversity, but when it comes up to a charter school or when it comes up to alternate choices in education, of course, they hate diversity. But it's time for governments to be putting their heads together and thinking, how do we develop and make sure we have in place a track for students, let's say wanting to go to a university, but a track that is completely distant from the cumbersome, the time-taking, the bureaucratically heavy, the hugely expensive system of public education. There are other ways to do it, folks. You may want to be thinking about that, and certainly tell your legislators that alternate systems other than the public system are desperately and dire needed, and they are the ones that are growing. Those are the school districts that are growing. If you're stepping out for Halloween, here's some costume tips for you. You can impress your kids. What's going hot with the Halloween costumes? People dressing up as the K-pop, reflecting the K-pop film and presentation of the Demon Hunters. And I talked about Demon Hunters about a week ago on this very show. Not many other people have talked about it. Now they're becoming more known. So if you want to dress up as something, the Demon Hunter costume apparently is good. Minecraft, of course, with the chicken jockey. And if you haven't heard of that, you want to check that out. So get your kid dressed up as a chicken jockey if you're going out. And of course, Labubu dolls are popular and sought after. And so anybody dressing up as those are going to be seen as really kind of with it. I'm not suggesting that people, in fact, do get out there and get all dressed up. But there's been this year in particular, and it's happened in other years, but this year in particular, the issue of the dark side of Halloween, its origins, its satanic rituals, etc., that spawned the particular date, even coinciding with All Saints' Day in the church. What's been happening the last few days is we've seen well-known pop artists, well-known musicians coming out on either side of this issue. But Forrest Frank, of course, very well-known Christian singer, coming out with strong concerns about this whole approach in terms of Halloween and the satanic stuff that is associated with it. And a number of people in the Hollywood scene who claim that they used to be significantly involved in satanic type of activity and are now not doing that either because they've received Christ, as we like to say in the evangelical world, or they've had some other kind of revelation. They're realizing and they're saying that is a dark place. That's an evil place. And Halloween should not be celebrated evil with evil. If you're going to celebrate with anything, flip to the other side, the positive side. Many communities, many churches have put on special events on Halloween, celebrating good and happy things because they've noticed that, and they're making clear note of this, that the gory nature of Halloween costumes, it seems to be on the rise, and the popularity of things like simulated body parts lying around. We just are, the question is, are we becoming darker in general? And something we may want to think about. Now, the item I want to close on here, it kind of makes you smile, but you wonder, well, did they really think about this? The Milwaukee Chainsaw Company, very famous company. I've owned chainsaws in the past, haven't had a Milwaukee, but they're a great chainsaw. They've just announced that they have found that thousands of their chainsaws have a defective part, which is causing lacerations when the user uses it. In other words, the chainsaw is cutting into their own body parts, and so they've recalled 7,500 Milwaukee chainsaws. I couldn't help but think of the timing of that with everything related to at Halloween chainsaw massacres and everything that goes with that. It looks like all of the chainsaws, in fact, are not being used to massacre people because many of them are in getting fixed. And that's an interesting note to close with on Halloween as we come to the final item, which is to recall that it was on a Halloween over 500 years ago that a priest by the name of Martin Luther, who was very upset with what he saw as things within the Catholic Church which couldn't be found in the Bible, the ability to pay your way out of sin or to pay your dead relatives out of sin, the proliferation of offerings. All of this, in his view, was contrary to what the Bible said about our lives and how we draw closer to God. And it was a Thanksgiving evening over 500 years ago that Martin Luther nailed to his 95 theses, they were called, 95 points of departure with the Church of the Day, nailed it to the church door in Wittenberg. And how that act, because people then started looking at what he was posting, was actually the beginning of the Reformation in Europe and the eventual Renaissance. This was a real turning point in the culture of the day, and it all happened on Halloween evening. Folks, have an eye-opening Halloween evening, and may you celebrate truth and all the good things in life. We'll catch you tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in.